Welcome back to Star Wars 2020, where we're taking a look back at the entirety of the Skywalker Saga. Now, today we're talking about The Last Jedi. This is probably the most divisive Star Wars movie there is. Now, this one might be a little bit more difficult for me to get into because I've talked about it so much already that it's kind of difficult for me to feel like I'm having new takes or new ideas, even doing it as part of the series. So that being said, I'm going to try to tackle this a little bit differently. I'm not going to go too in-depth of a critique of it, but I am going to discuss some of the more controversial aspects of it and why I think the movie played out the way that it did and where I think some of the problems come in. And this is going to be both as a writer and as a filmmaker, but also in regards to the Skywalker Saga. So to start with, if you watched my video on The Force Awakens, then you already know that I feel like J.J. Abrams was kind of trying to straddle a line between paying homage to the original Star Wars movies and also trying to tread new ground, but as a result, he kind of didn't really do either that well. Ultimately, I felt like J.J. Abrams' design philosophy was stick as close as you can to the original and take risks as little as possible. Whereas I feel like Rian Johnson's approach is take as many risks as possible. And right away, I think that's where a lot of the difficulties come in with the sequel trilogy. At this point, we have two different movies that are made by two different directors with two very different design philosophies and storytelling philosophies, and yet they are attempting to make a trilogy that is supposed to be a cohesive story. And I feel like there is a significant problem there. Whereas with The Force Awakens, Abrams was really trying to play it safe and showing, hey, look, I can do Star Wars. I'm not going to take too many risks. I'm just going to do Star Wars as Star Wars. And as a result, it felt like it wasn't really treading any new ground. And Rian Johnson, on the other hand, seemed like he was trying really hard to push the series in a completely different direction. Personally, I feel like Rian Johnson could have told a really good story and made some very interesting Star Wars movies if he had done the entire trilogy. But I feel like the fact that he is trying to take the story that Abrams set up and then force it in a completely different direction really makes both of their filmmaking styles not really work here, and especially not work together. But I feel like the most significant problem with The Last Jedi is it's split up into three different story arcs, and yet they don't fit together well. So when you look back at The Empire Strikes Back, there was the story of Luke getting trained by Yoda, but then at the same time, you also had Han and Leia in the Millennium Falcon running away from the Empire. Those stories didn't really fit together for most of the movie, but they served well to break up one another's progression. So when you have a lot of downtime with Luke and he's learning and he's talking with Yoda and it feels like there's not a lot of action or excitement going on, but there's just a lot of plot development and story progression, you then break away to the Millennium Falcon where you get the action, the excitement, and the witty character interactions, and then after you've had a bit of the excitement, you then shift back to Luke and it slows down a bit. And so in that regard, both of the different story arcs really build off of one another. Unfortunately, with The Last Jedi, with the three different stories, it feels like they're all battling against one another. So the three main stories that you get: the space chase, with the First Order chasing down the remnants of the Resistance. And the second story is everything with Luke, Rey, and Kylo Ren. We'll just call the Jedi story arc. And then the third story arc is the Canto Bight sequence with Rose and Finn. Now on this watch through, I was trying to be very careful in paying attention to these different sequences because in the past, I really didn't like the Canto Bight sequence, and I thought the space chase stuff was just okay. But on this watch through, I feel like each of the story arcs are good in their own right, but they're really undermining each other. So for instance, the space chase sequence really gets broken down into only a few bit sequences here and there. And that really takes away a lot of the tension of the looming threat of the First Order about to destroy the last remnants of the Resistance. And then at the same time, the Canto Bight sequence, which I used to think was bad, is actually not that bad. It's actually a decent sequence, it doesn't fit in with the rest and it winds up feeling a bit unbalanced. This is a sequence that would have done well in a movie like Solo. Whereas it's a bit more lighthearted, it's more just exciting, adventurous fun, and yet the space chase sequence is a bit more intense and a bit more serious in tone, whereas the Jedi sequences kind of bounce back and forth. I feel like at the very least, if they cut out the Canto Bight sequence, the movie would have been much more balanced. We could have had more sequences with the space chase that would have really given more gravity to the depths of the danger of the situation. And then also, we wouldn't have cut out a lot of the Jedi sequences that would have really helped build up the situation with Luke and with Kylo Ren. And there's a deleted scene that I just saw recently where Luke plays a prank on Rey that simultaneously is just him kind of being goofy, playful old man like Yoda was and playing a prank on her, but at the same time it also serves to really show that she rushes in head first, she is too governed by her emotions, and she is not ready to be a Jedi. There are a lot of more minor moments like this that I feel like would have been very important to developing things that were just left out, whether by being cut out or just never being written and included in the first place. Now, I understand that a lot of people really don't like what was done with Luke, including Mark Hamill himself. But personally, based off of the story that they were developing here, I think what they did with Luke is just fine. And it fits perfectly with his character, given the way that they developed the world and Kylo Ren himself. So for me, personally, the Jedi sequence in this movie is some of my favorite Star Wars out of any of the movies. It does a lot of stuff that I really appreciate. At the very least, the development of Kylo Ren and Rey's connection, especially when looking back at the original trilogy and seeing the way Luke and Vader interacted across space in a very similar manner, but just not quite to this depth. You know, I feel like the inclusion of the introduction of the Force dyad between these two was brilliant, and I really like how all of it was developed. I completely understand how Luke would have shut himself off from the Force. I appreciate how Ben would have turned to the dark side as a result of Luke's potential betrayal and apparent betrayal. There's just so much here that I really appreciate, and I love the way that it was done. I love the way it was filmed. I love the way that Kylo Ren killed Snoke. I love the way that Kylo Ren took his place as Supreme Leader. And so if the movie had focused less on things like Canto Bight and really doubled down on the Jedi stuff, then I feel like this would have simply been my favorite Star Wars movie. Unfortunately, the movie we got is very unbalanced, and it continues the trend of not being significant to the Skywalker Saga. So in terms of the Skywalker Saga, of the story of the Skywalkers and of Emperor Palpatine, this movie just doesn't fit in at all. Yes, okay, Luke is a significant part of this movie, but this just feels like what happened after his story was finished. And it doesn't feel like a continuation of the first 6 movies. There is a degree of the Skywalker Saga narrative in there somewhere, wherein they're talking about the fate of the Jedi as a concept even, but that wasn't a significant focus of the first 6 movies. It was there, but that wasn't what the story was really about per se. And so if they were going to go that route of really making it focus on the philosophy of the Jedi versus the philosophy of the Sith and the nature of the light side versus dark side, and tie it into the first 6 movies, then they should have focused more on Luke himself and tied that more into Darth Vader and into Palpatine. As it is, it's not unimportant, but as the only element in this movie that really ties it into the Skywalker Saga as a whole, it's not that significant. So overall, I feel like Rian Johnson introduced some very interesting things. He just spent too much time fighting against what was established before him, and I feel like he would do really well if given his own series. I know there has been rumored, and he has talked about the fact that he is supposed to have his own Star Wars trilogy to work on. We haven't really seen any progression with that at this point, and I kind of doubt it's going to happen. But personally, I would love to see it. And honestly, I would have loved to see if he had done the entirety of the sequel trilogy himself, rather than trying to work with and ultimately against the creations of someone else. So yeah, at this point, Force Awakens and The Last Jedi both are very much not entries in the Skywalker Saga as much as they are billed to be that. And I feel like they would have been much better had they not tried to be part of the Skywalker Saga and just tried to do their own thing that were not sequels, but just happened to take place after Return of the Jedi. In the end, there's a lot that I enjoy about this movie, but it's also very frustrated by a lot of things that really detract from it at the same time. In a future video, I think I'm going to go into what I think Disney should have done if they wanted to really stick to the Skywalker Saga, and what also I think they should have done if they were wanting to avoid the Skywalker Saga and really pave their own path. Because as it is, it felt like they were trying to do both, and there was a lot of potential if they committed to one or the other. That's going to come in the near future, maybe a few weeks down the road. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Help me out by liking this video. Leave a comment, let me know what you thought of The Last Jedi, but please be kind, because I know there's a lot of hatred for it. Let's have a discussion, not a rage fest. I hope you join me next week when we discuss Rise of Skywalker. And until then, this is Uncle Joel saying, stay tangible.